Today's video, we're going to talk about cholesterol. So spring is coming, it's getting sunnier, and this is still highly misunderstood uh, concept about what it does, how it works. Basically, I would love you to dissect the basics of cholesterol, what it is, types of it, and essential role in a human body, then maybe how it's produced, why people are
Mhm.
still worried about it, and should we really take care of it when it's slightly off, and we always check it on our blood test as well. Then how to manage it, any health concerns, any worries, and maybe even talk about some myths that are out there that are still highly pushed. We have seen these like egg reports. You eat eggs, it's bad. You don't eat eggs, it's bad. What is the actual truth? And so yeah, let's just start with what the hell is cholesterol, what it does in human body, and what is the importance of it? Because we know that more often than not, if your cholesterol is slightly off, you might have a prescription medicine to lower it. Is this really something we need to worry about? And if we do, how can we manage it?
Right. So first off, cholesterol itself, right? Like just when you get blood work done, and I'm just going to bring cholesterol value up. This is a person's blood work here that has requested me to, let's see, share screen. There we go. There. Okay. So first thing is cholesterol, right? These is, for the most part, most people are going to get the basic cholesterol panel, which is going to be your total cholesterol, your HDL, triglycerides, and LDLs. We'll break those down a little bit. So the HDL and the LDL are what most people, most doctors are going to freak out about. And, one is called good cholesterol, which is your HDL, and LDL cholesterol, which is called your bad cholesterol. That's just pseudonyms. They don't really tell you good or bad, but the real thing is that most people think that this is like direct measurement. It is not. These are transport proteins, right? They're transporting something. That's the key thing to understand. Now,
Right.
triglycerides are a direct measurement. That is actual fat molecules in the blood, right? And total cholesterol is just the collection of all three of those. Now, this person happens to have all of these broken down by size, which is just giving you a more detailed view of what and LDL just means low density lipid transport protein. And these are going to be less dense than the high density ones. Now, the density, most people just think of like how tightly packed they are. Density actually means electrons, right? We're talking about really tiny molecules. So what this really should be called is these are less electrons, and HDL, the good one, is more electrons, right? Now, that actually dives into the pattern of what are these actually? These are transporting things in specific times of the year. So if you are living in somewhere where there's winter, you're going to expect LDL molecules, because they have less electrons, to be in more abundance. And if you live somewhere where, or at the time of the year where there's lots of sunlight and you interact with the sunlight, you're going to disproportionately have more HDL. Why? Because you need electrons to collect electrons. That is Einstein 101, right? That is the photoelectric effect. If you do not have electrons, you cannot collect sunlight. Why is that important? Especially in the relationship to cholesterol. And that's what brings me to this little guy right here. So these are all sex hormones, but there should be another little arrow off of this star here to vitamin D. Okay. And the reason is because vitamin D is actually a hormone, just like these sex hormones. It's not a sex hormone, but it is a hormone. Okay. So now with that in mind, what does this little star mean? Like all of these, every single one of all of these here, and this is not the first time people have seen this if they watched any of our shows. These are all your sex hormones and stress handling capability. Okay. They all come from cholesterol. That's what that little star is. Your cholesterol is crucial to make all of this work, including vitamin D. So right away, let's just talk about a myth, right? If you are given a statin, you are actively limiting your ability to make all of this. Okay, that is myth busting 101. A statin, number one, they have not been shown to do anything more than a sugar pill. 50% of people do not get a response from statin in terms of better health outcomes. That doesn't mean the statin doesn't lower cholesterol. The statin lowers cholesterol. The real question people should be asking is, does lowering cholesterol improve longevity or health outcomes, especially when it comes to cardiovascular risk? The answer is vehemently no, it does not do that.
Yeah,
Something that
we have seen
does,
many
go
studies.
ahead.
And just your distinction about that electrons instead of looking at density makes so much more sense immediately. So
Yes. Yes. Yeah, because you will notice that somebody who gets a lot of, like, just starts actively suntanning, their HDL goes up. They don't change their diet. Why does their HDL go up? Because the body actively recognizes, hey, cholesterol molecule, we need to actually, in order to sulfate, right, in order to do these actions, right, because here's another part that I didn't quite get to. It's not the act of having cholesterol in the blood that makes all of this magic happen. It's sulfated cholesterol. Sulfated cholesterol only happens when UV light interacts with the subcutaneous layer of your body where the cholesterol molecules are. That's what sulfates them. So sunlight is hitting the skin and then your body goes, holy crap, we're getting a lot of sulfation effect. We need to start producing more HDL, more electrons, so that we can collect all these electrons that are hitting the skin, right? And that sulfation effect is what's going to make your precursor hormones, pregnenolone. That's for men and women. Pregnenolone is the precursor to all of your main sex hormones, all these ones in blue bubbles, your testosterone, your progesterone, your estrogens, and then also your stress handling capability, your cholesterol or your cortisol, excuse me. And then, like I said, there should be another little offshoot here that goes to your vitamin D and immune system regulation, right? So having said that, that is one thing that I actively help people with is, hey, if you're on statin medications and you had, for whatever, sometimes they're lucky. They're just get put on a statin proactively. They've never had a problem, but their doctor put them on it. In that case, it's very easy to start weaning somebody off, especially going into springtime. But if you had other issues and stuff like that, then you got to do it a little bit more strategically, especially because most people are on like multiple statins, not just one. They're like on 2 different kinds and stuff like that. So then you have to play it a little bit more cautiously. But if you aren't on any of those, then the thing is, when you see somebody's blood work like this person, right, they have, let's just look at the simplified version because most people are going to only have the simplified version. They have high LDL, right? They have high LDL. That's a good thing. That means you have a lot of ability to sulfate this cholesterol into your sex hormones and into your vitamin D. Now, speaking of vitamin D, oral vitamin D, synthetic vitamin D, will raise LDL cholesterol. The reason for that is because oral vitamin D, even the injection, is not active. It is in an oil format and is not active. Your liver has to turn it into 25 hydroxy vitamin D. 25 hydroxy vitamin D is now water soluble. Your liver does that transformation. In order for the vitamin D that you're consuming with an injection or orally to get to the liver to be processed correctly, it needs to do that with LDL. So if you take large amounts of exogenous vitamin D, you can expect a high LDL level. Even if you're doing a lot of other things correct, eating very low fat, and all these things, because your body, most of your cholesterol in this is not really dictated by what you eat. Your liver is just responding to certain other molecules, like, hey, is this vitamin D active or not active? That's going to change the outcome. If you have a lot of active vitamin D going on because you're sulfating it, that starts to become more HDL dominant. So just
how
those
important is liver health for all this?
Very important. Very, very important. Because if you have crappy liver, you're going to need your vitamin D will basically not move. Right. So you can take like a lot of vitamin D. And I've seen this with people taking 10,000 units, 20,000 units of vitamin D, and they're 25 hydroxy vitamin D doesn't move up very much is because their liver is having a hard time transporting it. And what does that have to do? It has to do with cytochrome P450 in the liver. Cytochrome P450 is coded for 450 nanometers. It's in the name. 450 nanometer light is in the blue-green range from sunlight, right? This doesn't mean go shine a blue and green light on your liver. It means the sunlight environment needs to have a whole lot of that in there. That's summertime. That's middle of the day type of sunlight. And it needs to
And
be
is there
active.
any specific times that is better to be exposed to this type of frequency, or 10, 15 minutes is enough?
Yeah, 10 to 15 minutes is usually enough as long as the skin is involved. See, that's another misconception people get into is, oh, I go outside a lot. And then I ask them how they go outside. And we've talked about this, right? They're fully clothed. They're not, especially if you're noticing that you have liver enzymes that are a little bit elevated, or this particular circumstance, you're taking a lot of vitamin D and nothing's really happening. Then it means, hey, you need to actually expose your midsection to the sunlight. 15 to 20 minutes daily is more than enough if it's done in the middle part of the day, from about 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., depending on where you live on the planet. If you live really close to the equator, that window gets bigger. It starts at like 8 a.m. versus all the way to like 4 p.m., right? It's a really big window if you're close to the equator. The further away from the equator, the window gets shorter and it gets moved to the middle part of the day.
And can you bypass it with maybe some infrared saunas or any equipment or anything of sort?
It would, well, so this is something that you can kind of hack, but it's not just the red light. It's the combination of red light with UV light, right? We've briefly spoken about this with other places because of that cytochrome P450, right? So a black light starts at around 400 nanometers all the way down to 320, 340, something like that. And then just before UVA light is this 400 to 450. So exposing yourself to something that has UVA plus red light plus a little bit of just an incandescent type light that has more full spectrum can help with this during the winter. But it is a system that is dissipative in nature. In other words, if you do a good job during the summertime, you don't have to worry about this because your body has been able to collect this in the molecules, right? When your HDL goes up because you're in a lot of high sunlight, it's collecting electrons. Remember what I said, high amounts of electrons versus low amounts of electrons. When you have high amounts of electrons, you can collect more electrons. They are used later in the winter time to keep things running correctly, including your cytochrome P450 and other enzymatic processes. That is the key. That's why right now we're doing this video, because it's going into spring. The equinox is happening in 2 weeks. That's setting you, this is the perfect time to start helping your body work correctly by taking advantage. The sun is, if you live in the northern hemisphere, the sun is very much just barely getting strong enough to start giving you UVA light. It's not going to cause any damage, and there's still an abundance of red light. So like if you were to, like where you're outside right now, right? If you measured with an actual measuring device to measure how much infrared and UVA and all of that, what it would look like is about 70 to 85% of the light that's interacting with you right now is infrared and red. And then a sliver of it is visible light. That's all the colors of the rainbow. And then even a smaller sliver is UVA and UVB because of the time of year. That sets you up to be able to collect a whole lot of electrons from the UVA light and start the processes of turning all this around without ever really being in any danger of damaging your skin at all, especially because it's cooler weather. Cooler weather changes the dynamics of the skin of how easily it collects sunlight. So being semi frosty weather, like 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think would be like 10 or 5 degrees Celsius, something like that, 8 degrees Celsius, I think. That type of weather is like perfect. It's chilly, right? It's a little bit chilly.
8 degrees Celsius.
Yep, yep. So 8 degrees Celsius is like the perfect temperature to be outside in the middle part of the day, because you're going to collect a crap ton of electrons and start this transformation process for moving into spring and summer. And it's going to start creating a lot of alpha MSH, because alpha MSH is the same thing as melanotan 2. That starts to get upregulated with UV light and cold. You're in a unique time of the year where you're getting both, right? So now that starts to become protective to the skin for stronger sunlight that's going to come later in the days and later in the season, so that now you start really ramping up this production right here, the cholesterol sulfation effect of creating vitamin D, creating cholesterol, etc. Now, there is more to this, right? We talk about sex hormones, we've talked about vitamin D. Now let's talk about another hormone that a lot of people are kind of starting to get into, especially biohackers and stuff like that. And that is this hormone right. Oh, actually, it's right here. Right here, leptin. So leptin should correlate with the amount of body fat that you have on you, if you are releasing it into the bloodstream, right? So let's talk a little bit about where leptin is located and how it gets acted upon. Leptin is located in the subcutaneous layer of your body fat. So in other words, right underneath your skin. It is held there by cholesterol molecules, fat molecules, your subcutaneous layer of body fat, okay? It's held there. It's accumulated there in your fat cells. So as you eat more through the winter and you accumulate body fat and stuff, you will accumulate more leptin in that layer, but it's not doing anything. It's waiting to be acted upon by something. That something is UV light. UV light stimulates the fat cells to release their leptin into the bloodstream. So the more body fat you have, if you get out into the sun with a lot of skin exposed, the more leptin you'll release into the bloodstream. This particular person has that particular issue. She's a female, right? And the female range is anywhere from 4.7 all the way to 23.7. But for her body fat percentage, which is in the 30 range, this is a low level of leptin. This is a low level of leptin. So what does that mean as far as like behaviors and things of that nature? When very little leptin is sensed by the hypothalamus, that tells the body that you have more room to put more body fat on. That's essentially what it's telling the brain, the pituitary, right? So what does that mean? It means that hunger cravings will be nice and high. It means that activity level won't be regulated up. It'll be regulated to be normal or down. It also means that activity level you won't be a fidgety person. So NEAT will go down or stay normal, right? When leptin levels are low. And the lower they go, the more your NEAT goes down, the more sedentary you become, and the more hunger cravings you get, because it's supposed to track with body fat percentage. Body fat, normal amounts of body fat. We're not talking about visceral fat. We're talking about the normal body fat that you would accumulate from overeating initially is all subcutaneous, right? It's all around on the surface of your body. Let's put it that way. And the reason it accumulates in that manner is so that when you go out into the sunlight, it can be interacted with by sunlight to get released into the blood, to then later at night go into the hypothalamus to then tell the brain at night while you're sleeping, hey, this person has this much energy on their body, right? And then your body does some algorithmic calculation, some quantum physics, and goes, oh, this person has this much energy on their body. That means that that's plenty of energy for a lot of activity, so it raises activity and it blunts hunger and it starts to control how much body fat is on you. You lose control when leptin does not track your body fat anymore, right? And the key component that starts to make it unbalanced is the leptin not being released into the bloodstream because it's not being acted upon by UV light. The second component to that is what I mentioned, where leptin interacts into the hypothalamus at night. Bright nights, in other words, lots of lights on, lots of blue light interacting with your skin and your face and your eyes. What does that do? It lowers melatonin. When melatonin is lowered, thyroid system gets lowered. When thyroid system gets lowered, growth hormone system gets lowered. When growth hormone system gets lowered, that starts to mess up sleep circadian wavelengths. So in other words, light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep. When you don't do that, you stay up later, and then leptin never gets let into the brain. So sometimes if people go outside a lot, they'll have really high levels of leptin, but they still have leptin or leptin resistant type issues. And the reason is not the first part there. It's not that they're not releasing leptin into the bloodstream. It's that now that leptin's into the bloodstream, it's not getting into the hypothalamus. And now that starts to tell me, oh, let's look at what's going on at night. What's your behavior around nighttime, right? So there's two components to the leptin story. It is how much skin is in the game during the day when there's lots of UV light, and how much lack of light do you have at night to make sure that your brain goes through the right sleep cycles. Because the leptin, or the hypothalamus, I should say, is primed to receive leptin after 2 sleep cycles if melatonin has been released, thyroid has been released, and growth hormone has been released. That happens right around midnight. If you're going to bed at 11:30 at night, you're not going to go through those sleep cycles by the time 3 a.m. hits. And the reason why I say that is because 3 a.m. hits and your body starts reversing all the processes of sleep. It starts converting T4 into T3. It starts starting to raise cortisol so that you can wake up, right? Because you're a diurnal creature. So essentially you truncated the nighttime in the early part of the night, and leptin never got a chance to go into the brain to tell your body how much fuel is on board.
And would you also add like behavior in sense of nutrition? If somebody comes home after a really long day at work and has a big meal before going to bed because they haven't consumed their calories, that's going to mess this up as well.
Correct. Yeah. And that's going to be a little bit more subtle. Some people, especially like if you are real, like a big muscular person, is probably not going to have that big of a discrepancy. And the reason is because that particular outcome is influencing insulin, and insulin influences growth hormone release, right? So remember the cascade: melatonin, thyroid, growth hormone, and then leptin gets let into the brain. When you eat a lot, in particular, a lot of carbohydrates right in the evening, you're going to have a larger insulin spike, which is going to suppress growth hormones. Right? Again, this is natural, right? This is in a natural person. We can circumvent some of these with some pharmaceuticals and things of that nature if you know what you're doing, right? Like, but that's why I'm explaining it in this detail, because it might give some people some ideas of how to kind of manage that, right? But yes, so that is correct.
Also explained previously that this is why it's so essential. What you're basically saying is that if you see something off, don't try to medicate straight away. Try to figure out where it is coming from, and understand that where it's coming from in a sense that for you it's going to be different to someone else. You know, when
Correct.
you look at someone like myself who is just slightly oversized for his height, my body will respond to these things completely different than someone who is a normal body weight and trying to struggle to lose body fat.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, absolutely. And again, you know, muscle mass plays a role in this. Where you live plays a role in this, right? Because another thing that will circumvent sleep cycles, right, like the thyroid production, and that's electromagnetic fields, right? If you sleep with your cell phone in next to your head, or Wi-Fi, or right next to a cell phone tower, you're not going to go through the sleep cycle correctly. So that means that melatonin won't be released correctly, and thyroid won't be released correctly. And often you will see that, right? Like this particular person is taking thyroid medication. That tells me more about that particular time frame at night, right? It's like, oh, they're already disrupting some of the key cycles that are happening at night. That's why they're on thyroid medication. And this particular person has, you know, because there are other reasons why you might need thyroid medication, right? But this particular person has all the antibodies for thyroid tested. They're normal, right? So this tells us she doesn't have a hypothyroidism, right? She doesn't have a disease with her thyroid. She just has a problem with circadian signaling, which is not allowing proper thyroid release of T4 in the evening, and then conversion of T4 to T3 in the morning. This is a perfect case of the doctor saw low thyroid values, gave her some thyroid, but then they tested the antibodies. She doesn't have, you know, Hashimoto's or Graves' disease or any of those. So then it's like, oh, well, why is this person's thyroid underperforming if it doesn't actually have anything physically wrong with it? And the answer comes back to circadian rhythm signaling, right? Because circadian rhythm signaling is not when you woke up and when you went to bed. That's just your sleep-wake cycle. Circadian rhythm signaling is the timing mechanisms of how your body does work. And then on this line, right? So the releasing leptin into the bloodstream, or getting sunlight to work on your body, right? Like just shining sunlight on you is not really going to work very well if you don't have electrons, right? That's the photoelectric effect 101. So how do you get the fat, the cholesterol molecules and the subcutaneous layer to have lots of electrons? Lots of omega-3s. Omega-3s have way more electrons than omega-6s by a long ways, right? So they're denser, right? So going back to the cholesterol anecdote, denser molecules, high density LDL has more electrons. On the flip side, the omega-3s, the fatty acids that make up your tissues and your fat cells and your skin cells and everything that you can kind of physically touch and see, is omega-3s and omega-6s. Her omega-3 index is a 3. It should be like 8, right? So incredibly low. Now, if you look at the ratio, right? So now we go omega-3s to omega-6 ratio, it's at almost a 9. It's an 8.3. So that ratio for a human should be a 4. So it should be almost twice as low. So she has a disproportionate amount of omega-6s to omega-3s. It should be flipped a little bit more, and her omega-3 index should be up closer to an 8. That's going to give her the ability. So again, there's multiple aspects to this. If you have really low omega-3s and a disproportionate omega-6, now your skin actually might even be predisposed to burning a little bit more, because the omega-6s, think of them like a low temperature oil, right? When you put olive oil on a hot pan, it's going to smoke. But when you put lard, right, or fat from an animal on a hot pan, it's not going to smoke unless the hot pan is really, really hot, right? It's a higher smoke point oil. That's the same concept with omega-3s versus omega-6s at the skin level. Omega-3s, when they get acted upon by sunlight, they don't burn. They actually end up making other molecules called docosanoids, which are skin protective, and the omega-6s do burn. And that means that this particular person is going to need to work really hard to bring up their omega-3 index so that they can even take advantage of high sunlight. Again, this is a roadmap, right, for this person, right? This particular person got all the right blood work and all the right measurements, where now I can go, hey, focus at this time of the day on sunlight, not the middle part of the day, even though eventually we want to work to the part of the middle part of the day as a dominant thing that you do. But right at this moment, you are at a higher risk of damaging your skin, and it's not really going to do you any good because the omega-3 index is so low. You don't have enough electrons at the cellular level on your surface to even take advantage of a high electron environment of the sunlight, right? So that is literally what really good blood work, really good meaning you tested the right things, but more importantly, interpreting it correctly as how does the environment and the natural status of biology plus living on planet Earth work? How does that system work? How do they couple together?
And this is what you just explained, is basically, okay, we are looking in your nutrition needs to change slightly, then your daily habits needs to change slightly until your nutrition catches up. And then when it does, we need to change your habits again.
Correct. Yep. So now you have a roadmap. You've figured out, where does this person sit on the map? Where are they trying to get to? And which ways do we need to go, right?
And why I emphasize that is what we both come across usually is, hey, what should I do? And you're like, we don't know until I know you. And what I will be asking you to do now might be completely different thing in a couple months, just because we want to bring you through phases where you get to that point, why we call in this series superhuman. When you are becoming so efficient at doing everything that you become more resilient at doing things that might be harmful now. So, which
correct, exactly, yeah, exactly, right. That's a great way to put it, right? Eventually, hopefully, over time, right? Like this will take a while, right? Her omega-3 index is low enough that I can tell you that even if she ate fish every single day at this low level, it's going to be at least 5 to 7 months before this is at an appropriate level where she'll be able to take advantage of really, really high sunlight environment.
Yeah,
Now, it doesn't mean she can't take any advantage. It just means that we're going to be cautious, right? In the middle part of the day, it's going to be like, hey, 10 or 15 minutes only. Whereas if this omega-3 index was like a 7 or an 8, I would say have at it. An hour, 2 hours, more is better, right? Because at that point in time, the risk profile has completely changed to actually be favorable.
Right. So, and this talk about cholesterol is always linked with heart health, things like that. What what's happening there? Why are people looking into that? You know, because we talked about like everything else, but predominantly when we hear cholesterol is you're gonna get a heart attack or whatever. So, do you want to expand how is
Yeah,
cholesterol into heart health?
yeah. So it's not that the cholesterol molecule is causing the problem. It's that, again, go back to, that's why I said, hey, LDL cholesterol, which is the bad cholesterol, is a low electron environment. That's what it's telling me. That's how I see cholesterol. What that means is this: you don't have a lot of electrons being acted upon you. Where do animals on this planet get their electrons? From the sun, right? What else comes with the sun when it interacts on tissues, right? We talked about the sulfation and all of that type of stuff. That also creates nitric oxide. So it expands blood vessels, it lowers blood pressure. So when you show me a chronic timeline of really high LDL cholesterol, it tells me you're lacking a lot of sunlight. It tells me that your blood vessels are small and constricted all the time, because when there's lots of HDL and lots of vitamin D in your blood work, it also tells me you have lots of nitric oxide. You have great blood vessels that expand and are very pliable, right? So it's almost like doctors are looking at LDL as the cause when all it is a side effect of the actual cause. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, low solar environment will cause heart issues. Low solar environment also causes higher LDL, right? They're treating the LDL, but the root cause is really low solar environment, which then lowers nitric oxide production. And then some people get to that point and they go, oh, well, you just need a lot of nitric oxide. So they start taking all kinds of things with nitric oxide. I'm like, it doesn't work that way, because the nitric oxide that you get from sunlight is tissue specific. So if I put my hand out in the sunlight, my whole arm will get all veiny because nitric oxide is being produced locally at the arm, right? So if you're trying to be protective of the heart tissues, what you want your chest and your whole midsection to be exposed to sunlight, to get a lot, because you have blood vessels everywhere, right? Like if you looked at a map of just your arteries and blood vessels, it's gigantic, right? So the more blood vessels that get interacted with nitric oxide, the more you're going to protect the heart and the vascular system. And that in turn lowers LDL and raises HDL, like I described earlier. So that's what's going on, right? Like, I'm not faulting the doctors, because the doctors don't know physics, right? The doctors don't know that high density cholesterol is electrons, high electrons. High electrons means now you've collected a lot more solar energy, right? Or have the ability to collect more solar energy. High amounts of LDL means very low electrons. That means you've chronically haven't been collecting a lot of sunlight energy. And so they just treat the LDL. That's essentially what's going on. But like I said, that's a mistake, because if you lower total cholesterol with statins and things of that nature, you're also lowering your ability to even make vitamin D, so our immune system can be suppressed. You're lowering the ability to make sex hormones, so sex drive will be suppressed. These are known side effects, right? These side effects are not hyperbole. They are, if you open up an insert of a statin, it shows you all these side effects. This is why they have those side effects. If you happen to be somebody that's on them for a long time, you're going to have more of these side effects, even to the point where the vitamin D suppression can be so much that it actually causes joint problems and pain in your joints and stuff like that. That's a common thing, especially when people are taking multiple statins.
We
And
see it
that's,
a lot. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
And
So,
it's interesting to kind of see also that there are follow-up studies where they check these people who are taking statins and who don't for like decades, and there's no difference in mortality, like none, and they are
yeah,
still pushing for it.
yeah, yeah. But a meta-analysis in, I think it was 2020, came out that actually showed that your omega-3 index does have a correlation with all-cause mortality that cholesterol manipulation does not have. So your omega-3 index, in my personal opinion, should trump your cholesterol numbers. In fact, the only reason why I look at cholesterol numbers and know enough about them is because they're on all blood work. You know, if you just go to the doctor for a checkup, they're going to check your cholesterol. But what they should be checking is your omega-3 index, because it tells you about electron collecting ability, right? It tells you whether you can modify the HDL, because see, as much there's so many drugs for cholesterol, but not one can raise your HDL. There's like a handful that claim that they can raise it by like 1 or 2%, but they never pan out. The reason is because it's about electrons. It's not about the cholesterol. It's the electrons that raises it. So you start with something that changes the surfaces, which is what makes your surfaces, what makes the surface of every cell. Fatty acids. Change the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio and raise your omega-3 index, and now you've changed the surfaces. Now you can collect way more electrons. When you can collect way more electrons, HDL goes up, because now HDL can collect more electrons, and now you're handling your blood better because of collecting more electrons, which then coincidentally makes it so that you can get more sunlight to create more nitric oxide, which now expands your blood vessels, right? It all works together. It's not one or the other. It's very simple, right? Like when you explain it like this, like the things to do: eat more fish, get more sunlight. If you're sensitive or you have markers like this person that predisposes you to a little bit more sun damage than we would like, start at parts of the day that are not so damaging, like morning and evening, and then only little parts in the middle of the day, 10, 15 minutes. And over time, the middle part of the day exposure can now expand, and now the evening and morning time exposure can be shortened, right? So now you only need 15 minutes of daylight exposure in the morning to kind of keep the circadian rhythm working correctly. And you only need about 10 or 15 minutes in the evening to keep it working correctly, as long as you block light at night. And then you can be like, hey, in the middle part of the day for my lunchtime, I just go outside and suntan for 30 to 45 minutes, right? I don't even really need to eat. Because another thing that people forget, right? We're talking about electrons and collecting electrons. What does every single bite of food and drink of calories turn into? It turns into electrons. So now you start to modify behavior around food when you are able to collect a lot of electrons in the middle part of the day. Most people that I know that work outside, they don't eat in the middle part of the day. They don't feel they need to, because they're outside working. They're working, they're putting out effort, but they're like, oh, just give me some water and I'll take a little nap in the middle of the day. And 30 minutes later, they wake up and they work some more. Why? Because they are continually collecting electrons all the time. You don't even
need to work midday. You just go on a holiday and you can observe yourself by like laying in the sun and whatnot, that you are more energetic and you don't even need anywhere near as much food as you would do usually. So this has been very insightful. So thanks for your time, David, as usual. And I'll catch you in the next video.
Awesome. Thank you.